Okay, welcome everyone. I am Megan and I am a nutrition field specialist with SDSU Extension, and we're so excited to have newcomers come, but if you've joined us before, welcome again for our Food Preservation at Home series. This is our 6th session of the series. I can't believe we've already made it through 6 sessions, and we are still running through September 22nd. We've already covered a lot of different topics regarding food preservation methods during the last 6 weeks. And this slide, or our next slide here, hope will advance. This is the sessions that we have left. But today, Karen Blakeslee is joining us to talk about pickling. And some questions were submitted with registrations to be addressed during the live session. But if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type in the chat box and we'll answer those as we go. All right, so let's get started. Before I introduce Karen, I would like to know if you could type in the type in the chat box your location and how you heard about our series. I love seeing where people are joining us from. And I am here today in my office. I'm located in Aberdeen. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Okay. All right, so I will love to introduce Karen. Hope and I had the opportunity to train with her when we got started in food preservation. So Karen Blakeslee is an Extension Associate in Food Science for K-State Research and Extension. Her work includes, but not limited to, running the Rapid Response Center, a resource to answer food questions, working in food safety, in particular home food preservation, and co-director of the K-State Research and Extension Master Food Volunteer Program. When she preserves food, she enjoys canning salsa, peaches, and sometimes jam and jelly. So welcome, Karen. We're super excited to have you. Before you get started, we do have a few polling questions. Let's see here. I'm going to launch the first poll, and this is based on today's topic, so your knowledge on current practices for pickling. Just if you could rate your confidence level. All right. Couple more seconds here. Make sure everybody has a chance to vote. Okay. All right, so we're kind of across the board. So we will hopefully improve your knowledge on pickling. All right, second question is your ability to follow safe practices. Oh, is this the same one? No, your ability, sorry. Second one, your ability to follow safe practices regarding today's topic. All right. Perfect. Share those. Awesome. We've got some confident and maybe all across the board. All right, last one is knowing where to go for safe research tested recipes for preserving today's topic. Give it a couple more seconds. All right. Wonderful. Yes, so by the end of here, you'll know even more on where to go. All right, Karen, you can take it away. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Let me share my screen here so that you can see. All right, let me get rid of this. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Greetings from Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas. I will say there's a little bit of construction going on outside my window, so hopefully that does not come through my microphone this morning. It's that season of all kinds of construction around here. So anyway, got lots to cover. So again, thank you for joining us today and learning about pickling. I'm going to cover quite a few things here in a short amount of time, and so hopefully you'll learn some things that maybe you haven't heard before. And again, if you have questions, put them in the chat and we'll get to those at the end. All right. So home food preservation is something that can be done year-round. Primarily it happens in the summer months. We're in the heat of it right now. I myself have done a little bit, and I've been getting lots and lots of questions from people who have been doing it. This year has been probably extra special, I guess you could say, because a lot more people have planted gardens, and now they're trying to figure out, well, how to preserve it. So we're learning some things what people are doing right and some things that are probably not the right thing to do. So hopefully I can answer some questions about those today. Can home food preservation save you some money? In the long run, it probably can. There is that cost of equipment and supplies that you need to start with. And if you don't include the labor, and there is some labor to this, in the long run, you can save some money. But I think most of all, it's that satisfaction that you yourself have preserved your own food and you can use it yourself or share it with your family and friends. So I want to do a couple polls during this. So let's do the first poll, Megan. I think that's number 4, if you would launch that. So how many years have you been pickling food at home? Okay. All right, very good. I think we got most everybody. We've got lots of newcomers. That's great. And then we've got some that have been doing it for a while. And that's what I usually see every time I do any kind of a canning class. I've usually got a mix of newcomers and people that have been doing this for years. And it's always great to see that mix of people. So I like to start off with this slide to talk about safety. We often hear this statement from people that call and they'll say, well, my jars are sealed, doesn't that mean it's safe? Well, don't get me wrong, the lid sealing is really quite important, but there's a lot of things that need to be done correctly before that lid even seals on the jar to help ensure the true safety of the product. And we really highly encourage people to get up to date with today's processes and recipes because things have changed over the years. This is the 21st century, and we really do encourage you to use current food preservation practices in your home. All right. There's a lot of science that goes into this, and it really does matter. And I'm going to talk about a few of these things. You may have heard these in previous classes, but I don't think it hurts to hear it again. So the science behind this is so important. Yeah, it may seem like you're cooking, which is, something that we all do every day. But when you put food in a jar, that really changes the whole environment that food lives in. And you've created a whole different product and environment, and the safety of that product changes also, as opposed to when it was fresh. So creative canning can really be an issue, and it can lead to foodborne illness. In fact, improperly home canned vegetables are probably the most common cause of botulism outbreaks in the United States, mainly because people just are not using the correct processing method, whether it's a water bath or pressure canning. They didn't pay attention to the spoilage signs, you know, those visible signals and that you can see or smell to bring up the red flag to show that something's gone wrong. Not using good instructions and just unaware of the risks. So there's a lot of things that we have to pay attention to. And in fact, in talking with the Ball Canning Company, they from all the questions that they get through their hotline, about 99% of the issues are because of user errors. So many of those things could be easily corrected, and a lot of food safety issues can be avoided. So what does food preservation do, or what does canning do in particular? Our ultimate goal is to stop the growth of microorganisms. This is spoilage microorganisms such as yeast and mold. Pathogens, the primary one we're concerned about is botulism, which comes from Clostridium botulinum. But we're also looking at inactivating enzymes. Enzymes are within the food itself. It's a natural part of food, and these enzymes can change the food, whether it's the color, texture, flavor, or nutrition. But there are ways in the food preservation process to inactivate those enzymes so that those changes stop. So for example, when you cut open an apple and you leave it set out in the open with air, you see that color change where the flesh of the apple turns brown. That's enzymes reacting to the air and causing that color change. But if you put a little lemon juice on that apple, that stops that color change from happening. So it's a simple fix, and it definitely helps protect the quality. So preservation, we're looking at the safety side and the quality side of the food in order for it to be preserved safely. So let's talk about some of the factors that affect this. The main one that we primarily look at is the acidity of foods. And the acidity is measured on a pH scale using a pH meter. The scale runs from 1 to 14. And you can see this here. The dividing line is 7, neutral is water. And so a lot of these foods are below this pH of 7. And these are ones that we like to preserve. And then we divide it even further through research on all these foods in preserving them, that a pH of 4.6 divides them down into 2 categories, the low acid foods and the high acid foods. So anything above 4.6 is a low acid food. These are all your plain vegetables and meats. These must be processed in a pressure canner. So like green beans, corn, carrots, for example, you have to use a pressure canner for these. There is no other option to can these in any other way. For high acid foods, these are between a pH of 2 and 4.6. These either naturally have enough acidity on their own, or acid is added to them. So in the case of pickles, in pickling, we are usually adding vinegar, or in the case of fermentation, we ferment the food to create the acidity. So those become what once were low acid foods, they then become high acid foods. So these foods can be processed in a boiling water canner because botulism does not like high acid foods, a high acid environment. And so we're not concerned about that in these foods. What we're concerned about is the yeast and mold. So the boiling water canner method can take care of those and getting the temperature to 212. The level of acidity in pickled products is important, not only for safety, but also taste and texture. When you're using recipes, do not alter the vinegar, the food, or the water proportions, because that recipe is developed with those proportions to be a safe product. And do not use a vinegar with an unknown acidity. I'll talk more about vinegar here in a second. So there are some things to think about with the safety of pickles. And that acid level is important to have that uniform level to prevent the growth of any botulinum bacteria that might be there. Water activity is another factor that we look at. This is measured on a scale from 0 to 1. 0.85, which is here, is the dividing line whether a food is a high moisture food or a low moisture food. So most of your fresh fruits and vegetables are naturally high moisture foods, but there are things that we can do in preservation to turn them into a low moisture foods. For example, like dehydrating them. You know, if you dehydrate carrots, for example, that air, you know, the heat, combination of heat and air pulls out the moisture, and so it drops it down to a low moisture food. There's other ways to reduce water activity, such as salt, which is in most pickled products, vinegar, probably not so much on that. Sugar is another thing that reduces water activity. It binds up moisture and makes it unavailable for bacteria to use. Oxygen is another thing that we need to pay attention to. You know, when we can, we're pulling a vacuum on these jars to create what's called an anaerobic environment. Now, this particular environment is one where botulism does like to grow, but if we've canned that food properly and followed a good recipe, used the right procedures, we have really no concerns about this. There are bacteria that like to grow with air. There's others besides botulism that like to grow in an anaerobic environment, and then there are some that can go either way. But primarily for canning, the anaerobic environment is the one we have to pay attention to. But again, using right procedures and good recipes, this is something that you really shouldn't have any issue with. The types of foods, bacteria likes to grow with high moisture, high protein, low acid foods. You know, that's just the nature of them. And they like those types of foods. But really, if any food is handled improperly, it can be an issue. So the number one thing that you can do before you even start handling food is washing your hands. I think we've all heard that statement a lot here lately, and it's so important in so many ways, for your overall health and for food safety. So take the time to do that. The time that it takes to process a food, it is different for every type of food, and that's why tested recipes are so important. Every canned food has its own process, and so follow those recipes and do not rush the process. You got to make time to do this in order to do it properly. If you rush through it, you may skip a step or rush it too much, and it can compromise the safety of the food. The other thing to also consider here, the time for your elevation of where you live. For water bath processing, you have to adjust the processing time depending on where you live, and I'll talk about that more here in a minute. And the other thing is, don't under process it, and that's what can happen if you do not adjust your processing for your altitude. You could be under processing. So again, just don't rush this process, and just make sure you have enough time to do this. Again, temperatures that we're looking at for home canning for high acid foods. The temperature of 212 is what we're looking for. For low acid foods, we're getting the temperature up to 240 in order to kill any botulism pathogens that might be there. Freezer storage, which I won't really get into today, really starts at 32, but your foods really don't freeze solidly until they get down to 0. So these are just some temperatures to keep in mind. I want to talk about how recipes are developed and tested. when studies are done on these recipes, they do what's called heat penetration studies. And this is done to determine the safe processing time for whatever food mixture is inside that jar. So these pictures show you a couple of examples of how the temperature is measured. This is a standard canning jar with the lid and the ring on it, and then it has a temperature probe down the middle of the jar. And this is called the cold spot. And so the temperature, depending on the food, depending on how it's being processed, this is monitored to see how long it takes to reach the proper temperature. So this is one way it's done. This is another type of temperature monitoring system. This is a wireless system here, where this one up here is connected to a wire. So so this is a really important part of developing recipes, and to prove how well the heat penetration goes through the jar. Now, heat penetration is affected by many factors: the type of food, how the heat moves through the jar, whether it's by convection or conduction. Convection, the food is usually more liquidy. The more watery, I guess you could say. The heat moves through it a little faster. With conduction, the food is usually a little thicker, and so it goes straight through the jar like this. Sometimes it's a combination. Again, it just depends on the viscosity of the product. Also depends on the size of the food pieces, how well it's packed into the jar. So lots of things that go into this, and really do affect the temperature of the product and how it heats in the jar. So I've been talking about tested recipes. So where do we go for such things? And this is a common question is, how do I know it's a tested recipe? Well, these are resources that we like to point you to get you on the right foot. And I know South Dakota State has recipes, resources themselves. The USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning is probably our base where we start with recipes. These are all just canning recipes in here. This publication has been out for years, but it is regularly updated. Another one that's really good, this So Easy to Preserve book, is from the University of Georgia. They have been one of the leading universities on research in home food preservation, and they are really kind of our go-to source to get any help that we need in finding answers to questions. So this is a book that's available directly from them. And some of your extension offices may have copies of these for sale. They also have a website called the National Center for Home Food Preservation. And so many of these recipes that are in this book are on that website. All of the recipes that are in the USDA guide are in this book, and it includes freezing and dehydrating also. It's a really, really good book. Here at K-State, we have publications on some of the most common things that people preserve here. I'll show you or give you my website link here in a little bit. So lots of information there. And then the Ball Blue Book has been around over 100 years. They have really made a really good effort to work with universities and extension to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as guidance and recipes and things. And so the Ball Blue Book is regularly updated. And so make sure that you're using recipes that are newer than 1994. Because in 1994, the USDA did a major overhaul of their recommendations. And so look inside the book cover on these Ball Blue books and you'll see a copyright date in there. And so make sure you look for that. We do not recommend you can your own recipes that you make up. I see this often with salsa mixtures. And so and I'll get into that maybe a little bit more here, but you're really guessing as far as how long that mixture needs to truly be processed. So if you have your own favorite recipe mixture, you can freeze it and preserve it that way. There are a couple canning apps for your mobile devices or computers that you can use. Oregon State and Colorado State developed these two. This one on the left is from Oregon State. It's called the Canning Timer and Checklist. And then the one on the right is called Preserve Smart from Colorado State. And so if you go to your app stores, they are free, and search for these two. You can download those to your phone, and they will step you through the processes, whatever are the steps needed for whatever product you're canning. One thing and I think the one from Oregon State does this too now, but the one from Colorado, it makes you enter your elevation right off the bat, and it will remember that throughout the whole app as you use it. So that's really kind of cool. Then you don't have to think about it anymore. So anyway, that's kind of fun. Packaged mixes for pickling, especially. Oops, sorry. Mrs. Wages has had a lot of these mixes out for a long time, and some of them are not for canning, some of them are just for fresh use, but these in particular are ones that could be canned. So just follow their directions. It's as simple as that, and don't make up anything else with those. Just follow their directions and use them as they recommend, and you'll have pretty good success with those. The Ball folks have a couple of pickle mixes too, a bread and butter and a kosher dill mix, so you might find those on your shelves. Again, just follow their directions. Some places where we do not recommend that you find recipes from. There's a lot of bloggers that put out recipes. We really don't know how well those have been tested. Pinterest is very popular, and there's some really, I call them scary recipes out there as far as what people are putting out. Even old recipe books, old church cookbooks, I know they're family favorites, but you really don't know how well or if they've ever been tested for safety. Even some recipe magazines, they don't like to tell us very much about if their recipes have been tested. So be very careful about those. And also, just because a food is commercially canned doesn't mean there's a way to make that exact mixture at home. So it takes time and it takes money to get these recipes tested for safety, and there are a lot of good choices out there. All right, so let's get into the equipment a little bit. For pickling, you would be using a water bath canner, and this is on the right. This is essentially a large stock pot with a rack and a lid. It needs to be big enough and tall enough so that when you get your jars in here, you can cover the jars completely with water at least 1 to 2 inches. So you can test it out by, you can use your own stock pot as long as you can have some kind of rack to put in the bottom. It could be just a round cooling rack, but you can buy these racks with the handles separately, and they might fit a stock pot that you have. So as long as it's tall enough and you can get enough water in there to cover the jars, your own stock pot may work just fine. And then this one on the left, the Ball folks came out with this electric water bath canner a few years ago. This is a standalone canner. The bottom black part is the heating element, and so this does not set on your stove. The spigot on the side, the idea is that you set this by your sink so that you can fill it directly right there by your sink, and then when you're done, you can drain it right into the sink, so you don't have to carry around a big heavy pot of water. I've used this myself. I think it's pretty slick. So and especially if you have a flat top stove, this might be your answer for your water bath canning, because there are some flat top stoves that should not be used for canning because of the weight and the high amount of heat. you could crack your stove. So make sure you read your manufacturer's recommendations on whether you can actually can on these or not. All right. There are also steam canners out there. We call them atmospheric steam canners. These do not generate any pressure. These can be used as an alternative to water bath canning, but it's limited to recipes that have a 45 total minutes of processing. So that includes your altitude adjustment. So it limits you a little bit for some things, but for like jams and jellies and some pickle recipes, this would probably work. There's just a small amount of water that goes in the bottom, and then when you put the dome on it, generates steam inside of there, and you have to leave that dome on top the entire time. You can't halfway through open it up and add more water. Then you lose all your steam and your temperatures drop too much. So this is an option that's out there. Just make sure you remember that it's only for recipes with a 45 total minute processing time. Some examples of things not to do. Please don't process your full jars in your dishwasher or in your oven or the microwave. The jars are not tempered for dry heat, and it's a very slow heat process in your oven. So please do not do that. Open kettle canning is essentially putting the food in the jar, put the lid and the ring on, turn it upside down and then backside up, and then stop. There's no further heat processing after that. Similar to sun canning. This is really an old method of canning, and we just do not recommend doing that anymore. Processing full jars in your slow cooker, that's just not even practical to start with, and the temperature does not get hot enough either. Also, these electric pressure cookers, I know that some of the brands have a canning feature on them. We do not recommend using any of these for any kind of canning because we're just not exactly sure what temperature they truly get up to. And the process is actually could be too fast for the recipes that we use. So, so that's a little risky on using that. Use it for cooking your favorite meals. That's really what they're built for. And then in the pressure cooking world, these types of pressure cooker pots are not big enough or strong enough to actually can in. So this particular type of pressure cookers are not recommended. All right, types of jars. There's a variety of sizes out there. From 4 ounce to half gallons. Half gallons are only for apple and grape juice, nothing else. We have no instructions for canning anything else in half-gallon size jars. Make sure they're clean. Obviously, you can reuse them. Make sure they're not damaged. Run your finger around the rim. Make sure there's no chips or cracks. Look at the sides of the jars and try to see if there's any scratches, those could eventually crack. I've heard from a couple people this year where jars have cracked on them. So it happens, but try to take good care of your jars, and they can be used many times. The other thing that's important is to use the size that's listed in the recipe. So for example, if a recipe says you can use half pints and pint jars, you can't use a jar any bigger than a pint. That's not how that recipe was developed or tested for. And if you do use a larger size, you're guessing, and that could be a food safety issue. You can go down in size, but you can't go up. So if a recipe lists pints only, you could use a half pint, you could use a 12-ounce jar if you wanted to. So just process them for that same amount of time. Okay, use that process time for that pint jar, for example. I hope that makes sense. So the main thing is just don't use a jar bigger than what the recipe's listed for. Types of lids, the 2-piece metal lid and ring. If any of you have been shopping for supplies this year, lids are in short supply. And I know around here, I could not find any a couple Sundays ago, and I looked in 7 stores around here. And So it's, I hope that you can find them where you are. Always use new lids, wash them. Today's lids do not need to be preheated. This is something that's new. When Ball came out with their new style of lids, they made this recommendation, and I think this is important because that's a key step on how these are used. I know years before we used to boil these lids. We do not need to do that. Please don't boil them, because the sealing compound could get too soft and then they may not seal right. If you want to put them in simmering hot water, that's fine. Just don't boil them. And again, just always use new lids. They are one and done, and they should work just fine. Other equipment, obviously your kitchen equipment that you have, but these four here in red I think are really important in the canning process: a funnel, a bubble freer, measuring a tool to measure headspace, and a jar lifter. So obviously for making pickles, cheesecloth and a spice bag could be very useful for holding spices together. Lots of tools that can be used. Just want to mention how food is packed in the jar, and pickles can be, you'll see recipes done both of these ways. So the raw pack method is where the food is prepped, put in the jar, and then the liquid is put on top of the food in the jar. You want to pack these pretty tightly because the food will shrink some during the processing. So this is some dill pickle spears here. You want to put those in there pretty tightly because they will shrink up a little bit. Sometimes the food will float using the raw pack method. The hot pack method is where the food is heated with the liquid and then it's all put into the jar at the same time. So that food shrinkage starts to happen during the preheating process, and you'll get more food in the color in the jars, excuse me. The other thing is it does help kill some microorganisms that may be there, and you may not need to use quite as many jars. So for example, relishes are usually cooked before they're put into the jar. So the hot pack method, that's the difference between those two. After you've filled your jars, you want to measure the headspace. This is the space between the rim of the food, or the lid area, and the top of the food and liquid. It varies by the type of food. For pickles, a 1/2 inch is what is recommended. Measuring the headspace is important because this helps create a good vacuum seal and helps get whatever air that is left in that jar out. You do want to free the bubbles out of the jars first. In this picture here, this end of the tool here, stick that down inside the jar and that'll help pop any bubbles that might be in there. Remeasure your headspace and then you're ready to put the lid on. So again, this is an important step to make sure you get the air inside the jars out. Wipe the jar rims before you put the lids on, and when you screw down the ring, just turn it just until it stops, and then maybe another quarter turn. You don't have to put it on really, really tight, because you do want to leave a little bit of gap for that air to escape. And this kind of gives you a pictures of how this kind of works during the processing. So this part here is the food, and then this is the air that's up in the headspace area and your lid on top. Once this jar starts to get heated, that air gets pushed out and is replaced with steam. And so it kind of burps. The lid kind of burps a little bit. And so that little bit of gap is what helps get the air out. And then when the jar is done processing and cooling, it will pull a vacuum on the jar. So that kind of hopefully gives you an idea of how the processing part works and how the seal forms. So measure your headspace. That's really important step. Adjust for your altitude. I know around here, everybody people will say Kansas is flat. Well, it might look flat, but it's really not. On the eastern side, we're around 800 feet above sea level, but you get out in western Kansas, it's around 3,500 to close to 4,000 feet. And I know in South Dakota, it varies like that too. So know your altitude, and for water bath canning, you have to increase time to adjust for that, because as you go up in altitude, the boiling point of water goes down. And so this is important to do that. And when you're using good resources, recipe resources, it will tell you how to adjust for that. And it's typically in the introduction chapters, especially in the Ball Blue books. That's where that is. So pay attention to that because that is important to know. Processing time, I think I've talked about most of this, but this point here down in red, after the processing is done, for water bath canning, turn off your burner, take the lid off, and let the jar sit in there an extra 5 minutes. This will also help the seal to form on your lid. It gets the steam out of the way, and it makes it safer for you to get your jars out too. But really, it's mainly for helping that seal to form properly. So give it an extra 5 minutes and you'll have much better success. All right, let's do poll number 2 real quick here. Or poll number 5, I think it is for you, Megan. There we go. So what's your favorite pickled food to preserve? All right, we're getting there. Lots of cucumbers, but we got a couple relish and beets, and got one person that says he likes them all. Good for you. So yeah, there's lots of ways to lots of vegetables that can be pickled. So let's get into this a little bit. So there's 5 classes of pickles: brined or fermented type pickles. There's fruit pickles, relishes, the fresh pack or quick process type pickles, and there are some refrigerator freezer options too. So let me go through some of these. So start off with the pickle ingredients. I mentioned vinegar earlier. It is really important to read the labels on the vinegar bottles and make sure it says 5% acidity on it. Today's recipes are developed with this type of vinegar. So that is what you need to use. Please do not use, there are some people that make homemade vinegar. Please do not use that, because that vinegar has a varying amount of acidity in it. And there's some off brands that have different amounts of acidity. So always read the label and make sure it says that. Use canning and pickling salt. It's pure salt. There's nothing else in it. And that really is your best choice for any kind of pickling. Sweet pickles, obviously use sugar, and it helps preserve the food, but it also makes them sweeter. But in whole pickles or even pickle spears, it kind of plumps them a little bit. So because the food will absorb that sugar a little bit. Spices, whole fresh spices. This is some dill. This is here on the right is a couple bags of spice bags with some whole spices in there. If you have spices that have been in your cabinet for 2 or 3 years, they do get old, they do lose their flavor. So it's best to buy new spices every year to truly get that best flavor out of them. About vinegar, again, do not change the vinegar, cucumber, or water proportions. Again, look for that 5% acidity content. And don't change the vinegar amount unless the recipe says to add water to it. But that's going to vary by the vegetable, that ratio to vinegar to water. So so look for recipes for whatever type of vegetable you're looking to pickle. And there are some recipes that just use straight vinegar with no added water. So the vinegar is an important part to this pickling process. So make sure you're using good recipes to get off on the right foot. Some crisping ingredients that can be used: lime, food grade lime, not agriculture lime. I've had that question. People ask, can I go down to the local co-op and buy agriculture lime to do this? Please do not do that. It is not food grade. But you have to be very careful about using this. Make sure you follow good directions and rinse, drain, and rinse the lime, excess lime off after they've soaked. Alum, you won't see alum used in today's recipes. That's in older recipes, and it doesn't work well for quick process pickles at all. So that's one of the things about alum that's unique. Calcium chloride, that's what these two products here are on the right in the pictures. Ball calls it pickle crisp. Mrs. Wages calls it extra crunch. This is added directly to the jars. You don't do any kind of soaking like you do in lime, but it will add some crispness. Helps make your pickles crunchier. This is also used in commercial pickling too, to help make pickles crunchy. And then water. Hard water is a killer to pickles. It can really make them soft. So if you can use soft water, or even buy water, or you can boil your own water the day before and let it set so that the minerals settle out of it, you'll have crunchier pickles in the end. So that's another thing to pay attention to. The produce, fresh is best. If you can get these vegetables pickled the day that you pick them, that is really ideal. If you do have to keep them for a day or two, put them in the refrigerator, but they really need to be used as soon as possible. And using, especially on cucumbers, using a pickling variety. These are just some examples. You may have different varieties that are best for your growing area. So check with your extension office what varieties are best, but they look like this. I mean, this is an example of what pickling cucumbers look like. They're short, kind of squatty, and got all the little bumps on them. The other thing to remember on cucumbers, cut off the blossom end, about a 1/16 inch. That's the spot right here. The blossom end has an enzyme that can cause softening, and just simply trimming that off can eliminate that issue from being a problem for your cucumber pickles. There are some recipes for reduced sugar or reduced salt pickles. The National Center for Home Food Preservation at the University of Georgia has some recipes with no sugar added, but they use Splenda. And then the reduced sodium recipes, they also have a reduced, I think it's reduced sodium beet pickle recipe. So those have been tested, and so those are a couple options if you need that. I've had questions about reusing leftover pickling brine. It depends on how the brine has been used, whether it's been used in soaking the vegetables in them first, or if you're just pouring that brine over the vegetables in the jar. So if the vegetables have been soaked in the brine first before you've put them in the jar, then you cannot reuse any leftover brine, because that pH has been changed. The vegetables have soaked up the brine, and it becomes less acidic. The raw pack method, if you have some leftover brine from that, yes, you can save that, put it in the refrigerator, and save that for your next pickling session. This comes from the University of Georgia. They have a blog, and that's what they call it, Preserving Food at Home, and it talks about using that leftover pickling brine. For heating pickled vegetables, just some quick things about utensils. Don't use copper, brass, galvanized, or iron metals. It's best to use stainless steel spoons, or even wooden spoons to stir things. Using stainless steel pots and pans work best. Pay attention to that, because the acid can react with these particular metals and cause color changes or undesirable flavors. Processing. All pickles need to be heat processed through a boiling water canner, and that's to help reduce any spoilage. inactivate enzymes. So again, use good recipes to start with. There is a process in the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning that talks about low pasteurization processing. I've only seen these directions in a few recipes in that book. I've not seen this anywhere else. So this is where you monitor the water in your water bath canner during the processing time. And you have to keep the water temperature at 180 degrees. So it's a little bit labor intensive, but again, this is only for recipes that indicate this can be done, and I've only seen them in the USDA book. Just briefly about fermentation, these are some equipment things to think about using stainless steel. A lot of people still have crocks or stone jars. Those work great as long as they don't have any cracks in them, because liquid could seep out or into the, or contamination can occur if the crock is cracked. Say that a few times. You could line it with a large food grade plastic bag if you still want to use your crock. Large glass jars will also work, and it needs some kind of weight to hold down the food in the jar. So this picture is the Ball folks came out with this fermentation kit this year. It's a single quart jar with a specially designed lid that has a vent on top, and then it's got a spring inside of it to hold the food down during the fermentation process. So you might look for that if you want to give fermentation a try. Some things about fermented pickles and sauerkraut, again, using fresh ingredients. The fermentation occurs from natural desired bacteria that's on the food itself, and you combine it with salt in order to generate the acidity fermentation process. So this really depends on the salt concentration, keeping air off of the surface of the product during the fermentation process, and the temperature of where you're setting your container of food that you're fermenting. We've just put out a publication called Take a New Look at Fermented Foods. This is one that we just put out if you're interested in looking at that to kind of get a little more information about it. The fermenting temperature, as I mentioned, is important because really ideally between 55 and 75 degrees is ideal, but even this can change how long it takes for the fermentation process to happen. So if it's below 55, your product will probably not ferment, but if it's above 80, your product's probably going to spoil. So temperature is really important in your room, wherever you set this. Ideally, the 70 to 75 is probably the optimum temperature in order to get it done within 3 to 4 weeks. So make sure you have your thermometer down there. Another food safety caution to remember about fermenting, there was some research done on partially fermenting cucumbers and then putting them into the refrigerator. This could be a problem because it could support the growth of listeria, but this is for this particular process in itself where the cucumbers were partially fermented and then put into the refrigerator. So just keep in mind, if you're going to ferment, go from beginning to end. Don't do it halfway, okay? That's really kind of the gist of that. There are some refrigerator pickles. Essentially, they're fresh packed pickles that you could just put in the refrigerator. It's like marinating is what it is, especially if you just want to do a small batch. You don't do any water bath processing. You need to use them within a short amount of time, like 2 weeks to a month, and they must be kept in the refrigerator for safety. You cannot store these on your shelf. Freezer pickles, similar to refrigerator pickles, once thawed, they need to be stored in the refrigerator, and again, used within a couple weeks. So that is another option. There's a couple resources here with some recipes if you're interested in some refrigerator and freezer pickles. This one here is from the University of Maine, and the next one is from the University of Wisconsin. So So those two resources are out there. After you've reprocessed your food and you've noticed that maybe your jar did not seal properly, you could recan these foods, and this applies to any canning, but it needs to be done within 24 hours. After that 24 hours, if there's any bacteria in that jar, after that time, it can start growing when you leave it set at room temperature. And I've recently gotten a couple of questions, you know, they've noticed problems happening a week after they've canned a food. By that time, it's too late. And there's no guarantee that reprocessing will take care of any issues that might be there. But it is possible. I'm not sure I would do this with your pickled products because you're going to lose a lot of crunchiness. The quality is going to go down. So if you see any problems in 24 hours, put them in the refrigerator or freeze them and eat them right away. Okay, that's the best option on all of these. Spoilage signals. These are just some of the common things that you may see. Obviously, if the seal becomes loose, the color changes, rising air bubbles, that's usually a sign of fermentation that you don't want. It doesn't smell right. If you open the lid and it spurts violently, then there's gas being built up in there and something is growing. Obviously visible mold growth, and just remember on mold grows down into a food, so even though you scrape it off on top, you may not get it all. So, but you know, if a lid comes unsealed and you don't see any signs of spoilage, again, please do not taste it. Even if you stick your pinky finger in there and take a lick of whatever it's in there, that could really cause a lot of problems. So don't put yourself at risk on that. When in doubt, throw it out. That's the best thing that you can do. Store all your home canned foods in a cool, dry, dark location. Put a label on them and date them. We recommend that you use any home canned food within 1 year for best safety, for best quality. Yeah, rotate them out. I tell people you're not putting these in a museum, so use them. You put a lot of work into these, so use them. I want to quickly go through some other common pickle problems that hopefully you will never see. But cloudy brine could be because you use table salt. This picture on the right is some pickled beets where they did use table salt, and you see this white sediment down at the bottom of the jar. That's because the anti-caking ingredients inside that are in table salt settled out. They don't dissolve. So that's what that is. But if you use the right salt, like pickling salt, and you see this, that's likely a sign of spoilage. So that's another thing to be aware of. Soft, slippery pickles, these are some reasons why that might happen. Blossom ends not removed, not using the right acidity vinegar, not enough brine. So a strong bitter taste. Bitterness could be in the cucumbers themselves because of dry weather, but these are some other reasons why they might taste bitter. Salt substitutes are really not recommended because they can cause bitterness. Shriveled pickles, overcooking, overprocessing, dry weather again could be an issue, or you picked them and you let them you stored them too long before you used them. Can cause a lot of wrinkling. Hollow pickles, you see these holes inside these cucumbers, that's usually because of dry weather. There's not much you can do about that. You can still use them, but probably best to just grind them up and make relish out of them. That would be the ideal thing to do. Darker discolored pickles, hard water can do that. Ground spices, which can be used, but it will make more of a color change. Using these metals, utensils that you should not use because of vinegar being used. spotted, faded color, too much light, poor quality food. Pink liquid, I personally have never seen this, but it's usually yeast that could be growing, or even using old dill that can cause pink liquid to form. Garlic turning green or blue, and this is a jar of pickled peppers, and you can see this garlic clove down here that's turned blue. It's usually because of immature garlic, but it could be a reaction with metals. But there are some garlic varieties that have more of a blue pigment in them already. It's not a safety issue, it just doesn't look right. Pink cauliflower, it's a chemical reaction between the pigment in cauliflower and the pickling liquid. Scum or brine, if you see that when you're fermenting a food, that's usually undesirable bacteria that's growing. You really need to pay attention to that daily and remove that scum if you see that forming. Make sure you got an airtight seal on top of your food product to help prevent that. Lack of crispness, again, poor quality cucumbers, use them right away. I've talked about all these things already. Use a crisping agent to help make them crunchier too. And again, bottom line, when in doubt, throw it out. And please do not taste anything that you just see something like that just doesn't look right or it doesn't smell right. Trust your instincts and use your common sense, because we really do not want to see any of you become ill for any reason from your home canned food. Lots of resources out there. I put the link to South Dakota's Extension food preservation resources. This is my website here, the Rapid Response Center. I have a huge section on food preservation there. And then these links to University of Georgia's National Center, the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning. You can download the chapters or just a specific recipe if you're just want a single recipe out of that. If you want to get the So Easy to Preserve book, this is where you go to get that. The Ball and Kerr website is freshpreserving.com, and they've got some unique recipes on there. They've revamped their website, so you're going to see some new things on there this year. And farmers markets, you may see home preserved foods at farmers markets. We have a whole publication on this for Kansas. You probably have your own regulations up there on how to sell your home canned foods at farmers markets. So reach out to your local extension office for that to make sure that you're following your state's guidelines on selling home canned foods properly. Again, I want to thank South Dakota State for inviting me to present today. Megan, Hope, and Abigail, appreciate this opportunity, and I hope that this has been informative for all of you, and I'm welcome any questions that we might have.
Thank you, Karen. I have been monitoring the chat and I have not seen any questions come up, but if you have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat, or if you want to unmute, we would love to hear your voice as well.
Okay. I do want to mention a couple other things that I did not put in my presentation. I get questions about pickling eggs. For pickled eggs, it's basically marinating hard-boiled eggs. They need to be stored in the refrigerator. There's no actual canning process. We don't have a canning process for pickled eggs, so they're just stored in the refrigerator. Same is true for horseradish. It's essentially ground up horseradish with vinegar, and that also needs to be stored in the refrigerator. We don't have any canning guidelines for that type of product either. So, all right.
I'm not seeing any questions. I guess I have a question personally.
Sure.
For freezer pickles, does the texture or quality change a lot? Like, do you lose that crunchiness, or is there still some?
It's best to use them partially thawed so that you don't entirely lose the crispness. Naturally, that texture is going to change because there's a high amount of water in cucumbers to start with. So if you do freeze them, it's best to use them just partially thawed, and so that they're a little crunchier. But if you don't mind them a little softer, then that's what they're going to be. So.
Okay, we had a question come in from Brian. I have seen 5% pickling vinegar at least twice the price. Is there a difference?
As long as it says 5% vinegar on there, that's the one you want. Twice the price, it's probably supply and demand. That's probably driving that these days. We're seeing that food prices in general have gone up here in the last 6 months. So just make sure that you're looking for that 5% acidity. That's the important thing. And you can use white vinegar or cider vinegar. I forgot to mention that. Either one. They can be used interchangeably. Just know that the cider vinegar gives it a little more apple flavor, and as opposed to the white, and it gives it that slight brownish color too. So, but they are interchangeable.
Yes, Jim. I live up in the Aberdeen area, and I went to 5 different stores and there were no lids. So good to know that you were able to find them at your Ace Hardware.
You are a lucky guy.
And keep checking back, because they check with the manager on when they'll get in that shipment and be the first in line then.
Yeah, get your name on a list if you can.
Yeah. Any other questions? Otherwise, we will end. I have a few more polling questions. Let's see here. I'm going to relaunch. All right, so we are going to. All right, your knowledge now after Karen's session, your knowledge on current practices for pickling. Karen, I'm loving this because I feel like we've seen an increase in confidence. So
yeah,
that
looks like it.
That's
great.
Great. Absolutely. Okay, I'll go ahead and end and share results. Awesome. Okay. 2 more questions, you guys. Thank you. All right, your ability to follow safe practices for pickling. And yes, I will email, Karen provided a list of all of the links I shared in the chat. I will email those out so you are able to access them better. Thank you for addressing that you weren't able to download them. Okay, a couple more seconds. Make sure that we get everybody's. Okay, awesome. If I recall, I see an increase in this one as well. All right, and last question is, knowing where to go for safe research-tested recipes for preserving food, specifically pickles or other pickling products. Awesome. And I call that a success.
Yes.
An increase in confidence. Awesome. Well, thank you so much to everyone who has joined us. That concludes our program for today. If you have any additional questions, you can contact Hope or myself. Let me put our contact information. Or if you have any other, if you're in the midst of pickling, we can connect you with Karen as well. I know that I lean on her there's lots of questions that come up. So thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you at our next program on August 25th, and we're going to be covering freezing. Thanks everyone, and have a good day.